My 16-year-old daughter and I read all of Shakespeare's plays in one homeschool year, and this is what we have to say about it. My friend Emma and I are here to debrief after our year of Shakespeare. That's right, between last August and this May, Emma and I read 37 plays by William Shakespeare for fun. Emma, let's start by you introducing yourself and tell people how you got interested in Shakespeare, any early childhood memories you have about Shakespeare, and why you came up with this challenge.
Okay, so I'm her daughter. I have loved Shakespeare for as long as I can remember. Mom is very enthusiastic about Shakespeare, and she has transmitted that to us. So
I'm good at brainwashing.
yeah, there's never been a time where I'm like, man, Shakespeare, I don't know. Like, it's just, I don't know, part of our family culture to love Shakespeare. So, I've loved it for a really long time, but before this year, there had only been a couple plays that I'd read. You know, Macbeth, Much Ado About Nothing, Hamlet, etc. Like, several good ones, but a limited selection. And I was like, man, I want to read all of the plays so that I can be the Shakespeare nerd that I've always wanted to be. And when I, like, calculated it out, the weeks, I was like, it's perfect. There's one per week for a school year. So, yeah, it was, just came from the fact that I really wanted to read all of the Shakespeare plays, and I didn't want to do it by myself.
Yes, so she was able to make both her and my Shakespeare nerd dreams come true. So
Ascend to the next level.
Yes. So, yes, like Emma mentioned, this particular challenge was her idea. She asked me, I guess, last summer sometime if I was up for it. I thought it sounded fantastic, and so we started the challenge in August. But in a similar way to Emma, I have loved Shakespeare for a really long time. I believe I was probably first kind of introduced and got excited to Shakespeare as an early teen. I took an English class, and outside the home, I was homeschooled, but this was an outsourced class, and we studied The Merchant of Venice. So I think Merchant of Venice was actually my very first Shakespeare play I read all the way through. And then I later on took another high school class where we dived more deeply into a few more Shakespeare plays. And then it's always been something we have incorporated in our homeschool. If you're new around here, my name is Amy Sloan, Emma's mom, and I write at Humility and Doxology.com. I host the Homeschool Conversations with Humility and Doxology podcast. I have 5 kids. My oldest has graduated from our homeschool now, and then 3 daughters and another son. So from elementary up through high school graduate in our homeschool. And all of them seem to still like Shakespeare.
I will say, I didn't realize that Merchant of Venice was your first Shakespeare play, because that's the play that, so we did Merchant of Venice in morning time. Obviously, we weren't like reading the whole thing, but we memorized several sections from Merchant of Venice, and I consider that the first play that I truly really loved, because I think Midsummer Night's Dream might have been the first play that we ever did in morning time. Was it Midsummer Night's Dream and then Merchant of Venice?
I don't know that they went directly from one to another, but it's interesting.
I remember that Shylock's speech from Merchant of Venice is the first play the first Shakespeare piece that I considered that I really memorized, even more so than Midsummer Night's Dream. So
it was kind of your first connected.
Yeah.
Like, okay.
I didn't realize that was your first one, so now I'm like, whoa.
We're so connected.
Wow.
So for those of you who want more detail about getting started with Shakespeare with your children, I do have I have a free quick start guide to Shakespeare. It includes some printable Shakespeare monologues you can get started with your kids memorizing. But today we're going to focus a little bit more on not your younger children. Please do not do Shakespeare in a year with your elementary students. We're going to go for the nerds among you, someone who is maybe curious about this whole Shakespeare in a year thing, if we would do it again.
Is it worth it?
Is it worth it? What have we learned? And we have a lot of thoughts.
Yeah.
So, Emma, when you set the challenge up, Shakespeare in a year,
Yes.
can you explain a little how you set the plan up? Which I will show you. Of course we had a spreadsheet.
You know it. So, basically, originally I started with 38. We'll get to what happened with the 38th play and why we only ended up reading 37. There's some drama there, but
the drama.
I know, it's very exciting. But just basically, by calculating out from August to May, there would be one play a week with 2 weeks of Christmas break. So, I ended up doing it loosely in chronological order. There were some things like Henry the Sixth, where they were actually published out of order, like Henry the Sixth Part 3 was published before a 1 and 2, and then there were some plays in the middle, and that did not sound like a fun time. So where there was like a series, I put those in order, based on when the first one was published in the order. But so it's roughly chronological order
by publication.
Yeah, by
date.
Publication.
Yeah,
date, not setting. Although that would be really interesting. But
that's the next time we do Shakespeare in a year.
Yeah. So that's kind of how I set it up.
And this spreadsheet is available for free if you want access. It's just for email subscribers. So let me know below and if you want access about that. So you mentioned some drama. Yes. We did start with a play that now has an X over it.
Yes.
What happened?
So,
do tell, Emma.
Well, we got to the last play. We were going to be like, okay, we have one more play and we're going to read it. But it was not in two different, publications of the complete works of Shakespeare. Mm-hmm. Which was like, why does the complete works of Shakespeare not have a work of Shakespeare? So we did a little research. Well, I think Mom did the research, and she was like, it was co-written with somebody else, and Shakespeare actually did not contribute very much to this play. So we decided that if two different versions of the complete works of Shakespeare don't have it, then it's probably reasonable to be like, you know what? This doesn't count.
And then we just finished, and we were like, yes, we're done.
Yeah, so we read 37. If you think that we, cheated and didn't read that 38th play, then why don't you read it and tell us about it? But, because there was actually one other play that wasn't the complete works of Shakespeare, Pericles, that was also written with somebody else. And that one, Mom really didn't like.
Mm-mm.
I thought it was fine. It wasn't great, but it was mildly entertaining.
You actually can really tell the difference between a play written by Shakespeare and a play written by one of his contemporaries. Yeah. Which I should mention, back a little bit to my history with Shakespeare. I actually took a college class, Shakespeare and his contemporaries. So we read Shakespeare plays, but we also read Marlowe and Ben Jonson and a few others, Thomas Middleton. And my professor kind of did joke that the reason why he teaches this class is so that you can see just how far superior Shakespeare really is. So yes, we'll get into some of the things we noticed about his plays, but it was interesting how before I even did research about Pericles, I was like, something's wrong here. Something's
we have text
fishy.
Proof of the moment where the realization process, because we were talking about this. Well, I was on driving to Virginia. I was not the one driving, but I was in the car.
She wasn't texting and driving, Mom, I promise.
To Virginia while Mom was at home, and we were talking about Pericles, and Mom finished reading it, and she was like, oh man, this doesn't feel like Shakespeare. And I was like, well, it's Shakespeare. She was like, I feel like Shakespeare didn't write this as much as the other ones. It doesn't feel like Shakespeare. And then she Googled it, and she was like, yep,
I was right.
She called it.
Mm-hmm. You should listen to your mother.
She's brilliant.
Okay, before we completely go off on a rabbit trail, I do want to mention what we counted as reading a play this year, because this is actually really important when it comes to enjoying Shakespeare. We counted reading with our eyeballs. So if we actually read a text version of the play, We counted listening to a dramatic audio theater production of the play. I found on Audible 1 credit. We got the complete works of Shakespeare. So that was useful, especially when we needed to catch up and listen on 1.75 speed. And then we also counted watching a film version or a live performance. So those are all totally valid ways to enjoy Shakespeare. In fact, maybe watching a performance or at least listening to a performance is closer in line with what Shakespeare actually intended to begin with.
Yes.
Okay, Emma.
Yes.
What surprised you the most about Shakespeare in a year?
Well, so I came in loving Shakespeare, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and to be clear, I still do love Shakespeare. But as with any other artist, someone who produces that much content can't make it all. Like, you can't have 37 Hamlets. You know, so
Right.
there were some plays, which I was honestly not expecting, that there were some plays that were not very, I mean, they're still better than a lot of things, but they weren't very good. And there were some things that I didn't like. And I don't know, I think just being able to appreciate that, like, even Shakespeare wasn't Shakespeare all the time. So
Yeah.
that was something that surprised me, but also I was like, oh, it's okay that I'm not writing Shakespeare at all. Because it's like, not even Shakespeare wrote Shakespeare all the time.
Yes. You can't be Hamlet level all the time. Okay, so a couple things that surprised me. As someone who considered herself fairly, up on Shakespeare, I did not know there were so many Henry plays.
Yes.
Like, there are so many
so
Henry
many.
plays. I knew there was a Henry V. Love Henry V.
Of course.
I think I knew there were like 2 Henry IVs. You guys, there are three separate complete plays. Henry VI Part 1, Henry VI Part 2, Henry VI Part 3. That was a lot of Henrys.
Yeah. There's 7 Henrys, I believe, because there's Henry VI, Part 1, 2, and 3, Henry IV, Part 1 and 2, Henry V, and Henry VIII. Henry VII got skipped. So yes, there are 7.
Yeah, so there was a lot of history plays that I was completely unfamiliar with, and both rolled my eyes a little bit about at the beginning, as there was just more about Henry VI, but actually really enjoyed those plays as well. The female characters, secretly, in Henry VI were my favorite, I think.
Yes. Well, in Henry VIII as well. I love Catherine of Aragon. Like, I have not done a whole lot of research on the actual historical person, but the way that Shakespeare depicts Catherine of Aragon, like, she just seems, I don't know, so queenly and so, I don't know, I really like Catherine of Aragon.
Yeah, things we learned from the history plays. The other thing I noticed, even more so reading all of these Shakespeare plays at one time in succession, was how much thematic unity there really is across the plays. I mean, you hear Shakespeare's obsession with the word seeming. Like, that comes up both literally, the word, and thematically, I think just about in every play. So many common threads that you would hear him returning to these big human ideas and questions. Yeah. And that was really fun to get to see them as a whole. And yet to see a unity of theme, because that's what Shakespeare does so well. Is he's not writing original plots.
Yeah,
that's not the point of Shakespeare. He's using these plots. They kind of don't even matter. He's using them as a way to express the deepest questions about what it means to be human.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you can really, especially reading them in publication order, you can really see the development even and the deepening of those ideas as he goes along. And sometimes he'll write basically the same story, and then he'll write it again, but better. Yeah. Another thing that really, I don't know if it necessarily, like, surprised me, but for a man, Shakespeare writes the most amazing female friendships, specifically. Like, just not even female characters, but specifically female relationships, where in the comedies, even in the tragedies, like, the female characters have such, like, great female relationships, which I just really love. Like, one, Shakespeare writes just amazing female characters, like, they're like, yeah, they're just really powerful, strong, but also like not in like a girl power kind of way.
In a nuanced way.
Yeah, really nuanced female characters who are both really good and have serious flaws and issues that they need to overcome.
We're looking at you, Lady Macbeth.
But also, I just really, really love the way that all the female characters are just, they're so supportive of each other. They're like, they're all very much like just female friendships in Shakespeare plays. Kind of surprised me at how good he is at writing them.
I don't think that's what some, like, a modern scholar would think. I'm going to go find female friendships in Shakespeare plays, but next time you read one, maybe keep your eye out for that.
Yeah.
I love that. Okay, so now I want to talk about what was our favorite reread. So this is a play we had read at least once before and that we really especially enjoyed reading again this time. And I'll go first. I'm going to cheat because I'm going to say a lot, and so that way...
All of them.
I'm going to say all of them. No, so I just always love Much Ado About Nothing. I've loved that since I was a teenager and originally watched the Kenneth Branagh film production. And so I just can never get too much of Much Ado About Nothing. So, of course, I have to mention that as just a classic favorite. But a few that were especially fun over this year. I really enjoyed introducing you to the musical version of Love's Labour's Lost. It is ridiculous.
It's hilarious.
It's hysterical. It is not going to be the most textually accurate version of a Shakespeare play. It's condensed, as most film versions are. And it also takes some artistic license. But if you just want to explore a play and have a good time with your teens, again, I'm not recommending any of these for young children. It is the Kenneth Branagh version of Love's Labour's Lost. That was fun to watch with you.
It's a musical featuring 1930s songs.
Yes. It's
with excellent Shakespearean actors who are not trained singers or dancers. Mm-hmm. It's hilarious in every meaning of the word. It's just the most funny thing I've ever seen in my life.
So there's a little bonus recommendation. And then I took all three of my girls, so Emma and her two sisters and I drove to the American Shakespeare Center in Virginia, in the mountains of Virginia, and they have a replica of Blackfriars Theater, which was Shakespeare's indoor theater. So you're probably familiar with the Globe. That was for outdoor performances, but he also performed in Blackfriars, and we got to go see a live performance of Julius Caesar. That was fantastic, and it was like right around the Ides of March. So it's, if you get a chance to see a play live, I just really encourage you to do that. It's a very different experience even than watching a film. And then finally, I will mention that when I was a teen, I took that Shakespeare class I mentioned, and one of the plays we read was Measure for Measure. And my memory of that play, having just read it the one time as a teenage girl, was that play is wackadoodle. Like, what is happening? What is going on in this play? Like, I do not like the ending. I do not understand. Like, I felt very concerned and upset on behalf of all of the female characters and the terrible men in their life. And so it was really interesting rereading it as an adult. I want to like go back now and read it again. But reading it from this perspective, I was able to almost set aside the plot, which is, I don't think Shakespeare wants you to think it's normal. I think you're supposed to be almost offended by what's happening. But I was able to see why he used such a shocking plot to talk about these other big themes and ideas. And so I think it was one of those things that's interesting. It's always interesting to reread something at different seasons of your life. But I think that one in particular, having read it already, I had a very different experience this time around. How about you? Favorite rereads?
Well, one that I really enjoyed rereading was Macbeth, because one, it's just an excellent play that I really, really love. But also, I reread through Reader's Theater. I did with one of my friends got on Zoom and just read through the play, alternating characters and stuff, and that was really fun, both because doing stuff with friends is always more fun, but then also being able to, like, act it out a little bit was really fun. So I really, really enjoyed that one, and I really love Macbeth and the themes and ideas in that one. I really, really love. I also really loved Hamlet. Just reading that one again, and I love Hamlet. The past year, I guess, I became acquainted with the David Tennant Hamlet.
Yeah.
And ever since I watched it the first time, it was last spring, I think, for a class when I read Macbeth. Or not, I keep saying Macbeth. Hamlet. When I read Hamlet for a class, I watched that movie as well. And ever since then, basically every month, I've been watching it just because it's so good. It's really, really good. One of my favorites.
Yeah, and it's hard sometimes to find a Hamlet that you can watch unfiltered with young people. So, like, I wouldn't recommend several of the other film adaptations, as wonderful as they are in many ways. I wouldn't recommend watching them necessarily with your kids or teens. And so I do like that the David Tennant version is a fantastic film adaptation of Hamlet, but is also appropriate to watch with children around.
Yes. Yeah. Speaking of Hamlet, though, my one hot take. I have lots of hot takes, but one of my hot takes.
We have a section about hot takes.
Yeah, but
okay, go ahead.
Laertes. He's so underrated. I love Laertes. And I feel like everybody's always like, oh, Laertes is the worst. No. He's great. I love him. He's like, if Hamlet had some gumption, you know? Which, whether or not he should have made the choices he made, he at least made choices. Hamlet made no choices. He was just like, what do I do? I don't know. And then, like, by the time he finally makes a choice, it's like after he already knows that this is the wrong choice, you know?
Jefferson has beliefs. Burr has none.
Exactly.
Okay.
Like, Laertes, at least we know what he wants and what he stands for. And he's like, he loves his dad and his sister. Like, that's he's like, you know what? My main motivation is don't mess with my family. Like,
it's hard to argue with that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I love Laertes. And then he gets, like, manipulated by, what's his face, the king? Claudius?
Yeah.
Claudia?
Claudius.
Claudius.
It's terrible.
Cute. Claudia.
Oh my goodness. Here's the other danger about doing a lot of Shakespeare is you start just finding ways to work random phrases into your day. I don't know. Is that bad? I think that's great. It's actually great. Wonderful. Yes. It's a wonderful part.
Yes. I think about that scene from Much Ado About Nothing where Beatrice is like, I would eat his heart in the marketplace. Daily basis. And kill Claudio. You know? Same scene. I think about that constantly. It is just, that's where Shakespeare peaked, really. Like,
I will eat his heart in the market.
I mean, relatable, girly.
Okay, moving on. What was a play that was new to you that you especially enjoyed, or?
Yeah. Okay. I had never read Love's Labour's Lost before, and while I don't necessarily think it is his best play, it was, like, so campy and fun, and especially with the musical version. I really enjoyed that one. I actually really liked the Richard III and Richard II. Those ones I want to reread and, like, figure out the plot a little bit more, but I don't know. I thought of the history plays, other than, like, Julius Caesar or whatever, but of the history plays that I hadn't read before, those ones were my favorite. Yeah, I think those were kind of the new ones, especially, that I really enjoyed. So.
Well, my favorite new to me play was Troilus and Cressida, which I not only did not know existed before this year, but I am very offended that no one has told me what a wonderful play it really is. I then found out after I finished listening to it and thinking it was one of the greatest pleasures of my life. Mm-hmm. I started doing research, and all of the little scholar people online were like, oh, Troilus and Cressida is the worst. It's so dumb. And I was like, I'm glad I didn't read your opinion first, because I said what I said, and I stand by it. Troilus and Cressida is funny. It's really unique. It's like if Romeo and Juliet wasn't horrible.
That's and set in Troy,
and set. So I love ancient Greece. I love the Iliad. It was, I think you were the one who said it was like Homer fan fiction.
Yeah,
it was like fan fiction for the Iliad, but just really delightful. And actually, like, Cressida is a horrible character. At first, you have all this sympathy for her and think she's going to be one of the great, like, positive Shakespeare female characters, and then you realize she's terrible.
Well, it really, like you were saying, it really is like if Romeo and Juliet, but like more realistic, where instead of it being like, oh, star-crossed lovers, they die, but it's all sad and stuff, it's like very much like the realistic version.
Yeah, it's like betrayal, love, like standing for your war, like your country versus your family versus your honor versus the woman you love. Oh, so much drama. So I plan to reread Troilus and Cressida and study it more closely now that I know it exists. And then maybe I will convince all of the scholars that it's actually good. That's my plan.
Okay, I love that plan for you.
Okay, so those are the ones we're going to read again.
Yes.
We've talked all about the ones we love. What play do you hope to never have to read again?
Well, I know that we have some overlap on this one, but not Troilus and Cressida, what else was I saying? Titus Andronicus is horrifying. It
is like a horror movie.
No, literally.
It's actual horror.
I was just talking to my friend earlier about this today, where it doesn't feel like a Shakespearean tragedy. It feels like a horror movie. And it's really disturbing. There's nothing, like, even in the most tragic of Shakespeare's plays, it's very beautiful in its tragedy.
There's justice or hope or redemption or something.
Or even, like, just the writing is beautiful. It felt like there was nothing beautiful about Titus Andronicus. It just felt horrific. And
now so Titus Andronicus is also on my list.
Yeah.
I will say, as a caveat, we were reading Titus Andronicus in September.
This is true.
A week after my youngest son was diagnosed with leukemia.
This is true.
I haven't
thought about that.
That was a rough timeline. So
maybe if you read it, you will not find it quite as horrific as we did.
Maybe we should say we'll give it one more chance when we are not in a trauma situation. We will.
Let's give it 10 years.
Maybe
return.
We could be wrong.
We could be. I don't think so. No, I'm kidding.
But I mean, I wouldn't put it on your top 10 list. No. Don't start there. All right. No. Anything else?
I mean, I never liked Taming of the Shrew. I mean, not that I think it's like, oh, it's bad. I don't think anyone should read it ever. I just don't like it. I find it difficult. One, it is his first play that he ever published. I don't know if it's the first one that he wrote necessarily, but it's the first one that he published. And it shows, I feel like the first work of every author, regardless of how good at writing you are, like, whatever your first work is, it's not going to be the best. And
he does a better job exploring those themes and ideas in all of his other comedies, just about.
Yeah.
Except for the one that I'm going to mention that I also don't I didn't enjoy, and I don't plan to reread. And that was Merry Wives of Windsor. Now, Shakespeare has a body sense of humor. And, I like a good bathroom sense of humor myself. I am not too proud to admit that. However, Merry Wives of Windsor was like one extended body comment after another. Like, I just felt like the entire thing was innuendo.
It was exceedingly raunchy.
It was, I think, the most raunchy of all of the Shakespeare plays we read.
Lot.
It was so much.
There is no plot. It's just like innuendo.
I was kind of hoping like half of it was going over even Emma's head. It was like watching a modern sitcom, like in a bad way. Only I was listening to it and I was like, I think he just said what I think he said. Oh, so yeah, I would also say, especially with children, or if you're just like, I just want to read a few Shakespeare plays for a taste of his style.
Not that one.
I would skip Merry Wives of Windsor and Titus Andronicus.
Yeah. And like Pericles, it wasn't great. I liked it more than Mom did, but
yeah, that
one was the one that like Shakespeare only wrote a bit of, so it shows.
It was dumb.
And I was not the hugest fan of Othello. That one I just was like, again, it was like a little bit like.
Well, really? I think you just need to get older.
Yeah.
And wiser.
Probably.
And more. Like, I think there are some of the plays that because of the types of themes that are being discussed, you'll be able to understand more fully as you get older.
Yeah.
Any other hot takes? I think we've just sort of dropped them. Bomb all the way through.
Yes. I will say, so, I mean, I think we've said our really big hot takes, but one thing about, like, when you read all of the plays in such a, like, contracted point of time, you really start to just not care about the plot at all. And I experienced this especially with Cymbeline, which has the most, like, frankly stupid plot of all of, like, it is so stupidly convoluted. There's, like, so much drama. It's like, what is happening? But when you read it and you just don't think about the plot at all, I actually really liked it. And I found that the main character, the girl, I don't remember her name. There's so many names. But I really liked just some of the, like, the speeches and the themes and the ideas. Just, if you just divorce it from the plot. That one especially. Yeah. I just was like, what is happening with the plot if you just don't think about it?
Okay. So don't worry about the plot. You don't have to explain it.
Oh, well, we did read, I know you did it for, I think, every play? I did it for most of them, is before I read them, I would read the summary of the plot, just so you know what's happening, so that you can actually listen to the important stuff.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that a little bit when we talk about how to get started with Shakespeare. Okay, would you do this challenge again? And if so, would you do anything differently?
I don't necessarily think I would do it again this exact same way. I would love to read, except for, like, Titus Andronicus, read all of the plays again, slower, and, like, the rest of my lifetime be the Read Shakespeare, the entire canon of Shakespeare challenge. But I don't necessarily think I would do it again in such a short period of time, just because it was a lot, and especially by the end, it became difficult to really understand, and, like, you're just like, whoa, Shakespeare. It's kind of like, whew.
Yeah.
So,
I agree. I think I am 100% glad that we did the challenge. I am glad to have done it, and I think as two people who were fairly experienced with Shakespeare already, it was totally doable. It was hard. It was a challenge, especially by the end when you were like a little bit overwhelmed by Shakespeare. But I do think that having done it in such a sort of big picture way, I would want to go and maybe take like a month for a play. And you could cycle through it every 3 years if you still wanted to. But I just feel like some of the plays I wanted to sit with a little bit longer, or like slow down and think about them more. But that wasn't the point of this particular challenge. And so that doesn't mean this was a bad challenge. It's just one of the limitations of doing it so quickly. So I'm really glad we did it. I think it would be worth doing if you already have a background and are interested in Shakespeare.
Doing this if you've never read a Shakespeare play before would be really, really hard.
Yeah, I think if you tried to do this not having experience with Shakespeare in the past, you would probably hate Shakespeare, which is not the goal of this. I think it deepened our appreciation for Shakespeare and our love for Shakespeare because we already had familiarity with his work, with his themes, with his style of writing things like that.
Yeah.
So that being said, if you are brand new to Shakespeare, I would recommend starting with one of the plays that's a little bit easier and more accessible. And we'll start with Julius Caesar. It is a familiar play. It's a familiar story. The language is actually pretty simple. So don't worry so much about going to his greatest play. Go to one that's going to be easy to understand and to love, and then build from there. So Julius Caesar for a history, Much Ado About Nothing for a comedy, and probably Macbeth for a tragedy. Yeah. Those are shorter plays. They're, again, familiar, easy to understand, and it's pretty easy to find a film or a live production to be able to kind of go along with what you're studying. Yeah. And Emma mentioned earlier, being able to read some sort of plot summary ahead of time can be really helpful. You can find a quick, easy summary online. Those are very easy. The Shakespeare Birthplace Trust in the UK, I think, was my go-to this year, as I was at the hospital a lot and just needed a quick, easy Shakespeare summary before I started a new play.
Don't try and worry about spoilers. Shakespeare is not the time where you're going to be like, oh man, I need to have the big plot reveal, because that's not the point. This is not a murder mystery where you're like, who killed the guy? It's you want to not have to worry about the plot as much as possible, in my opinion.
So you can focus on, again, the language and the themes and ideas. Charles and Mary Lamb, Tales from Shakespeare, is excellent. E. Nesbitt wrote a collection of Shakespeare stories for children. And I have a lot of these kinds of resources in my Quick Start Shakespeare Guide, which, again, is free and can help you if you're starting with Shakespeare yourself, or get some ideas for when you're working with your young children, so that then when they are teens, they too want to do a Shakespeare in a year challenge with you.
I will say, it was also really helpful. A lot of the plays that we read, I had not read the play before, but I was familiar with lines and passages from it because we've done a lot of Shakespeare memory. So even if you can just having that familiarity with some sections, not even reading the whole thing, but just knowing a passage or even a phrase or a sentence can be really helpful. Also as placeholders. As you're reading through, you can be like, oh, I know that line, I know where I am now. Or stuff like that. Or something that you can just be like, oh, I know this. That can be really helpful.
Very helpful.
When you feel lost and you're like, oh my goodness, so much stuff is happening. Oh wait, I know this bit. I know what they're saying.
And I see that even Isaac, her 9-year-old brother, was watching The Tempest with us. We were watching a film version, and we had been memorizing some key quotes from that play earlier this spring as part of our morning time. And so, you could see his eyes, perk up when he would recognize one of the lines that we had memorized. So it gets you that connection where you're like, oh, I know this. This belongs to me. I'm a Shakespeare guy, right? Yeah. So I think we've sort of already talked about it. Do you have anything else you would say about where you're going from here with Shakespeare?
I definitely want to keep reading and just going through some of the plays. And I've already read them now, but just going through deeper and slower, and even in a larger group context, with being able to discuss them with lots of people. I would really love to continue to do that, and also just memorizing more Shakespeare and just continuing to imbue. No, that's not the right word. Just memorize.
Soak it in.
Soak it in, yeah.
Soak it in. Soak into Shakespeare.
Exactly.
It could be a Shakespeare summer. That would be a fun thing.
Shakespeare summer.
Shakespeare summer. If you have a Shakespeare summer, let us know. Emma, thank you so much for being willing to first come up with this really fun idea.
You're so welcome.
Do it with me in the midst of a really hard year and not give up.
And then, thank you. It was my idea. You stuck with me. Bro, I was very impressed. It's you can stop if you want to. And you're like, no, we did it.
We did it.
And I'm very proud of us.
I didn't read much of anything else, but I did read Shakespeare. Yeah. That was a good use of time. And thank you for joining me today on Homeschool Conversations to share your thoughts
I'm
and
always
ideas.
Honored.
If you want to hear more from Emma, she has actually been a guest podcast host for my listener Q&A episodes that
They're
always
the best ones. Not really, but
they're giggly. They're something.
Indeed.
They kick off each new season of the podcast, so definitely go back and check those episodes out. She's also a podcaster herself. She is one of the guest co-hosts on
the Kids Talk Church History podcast with the Alliance of Confessing Evangelicals.
Yeah, so make sure you're subscribed to Kids Talk Church History wherever you get your podcasts. And then if you want to hang out with me more, I would love for you to subscribe wherever you are watching or listening, and come check me out in my online homeschool community, Made to Homeschool. You can head there by going to humilityanddoxology.com/M2H. And I'm going to put links to so many other things we mentioned or talked about today in the description for this episode. So definitely check those out. And we'll chat with you again later.